Fallout series proves to be another successful video game live-action adaptation, a story that's held up pretty well through 2 seasons, with a third installment set for late 2017 and early 2018. In this video, I'll break down the key details and events of this universe, like its timeline and sci-fi elements, of course referencing the lore from the video games, which are the direct inspiration behind this universe. And that way we can understand the context that led to the events we saw throughout the first 2 seasons. If this interests you, get ready and get comfortable, because here I'll tell you absolutely everything. My name is Didier Solanilla, and this is Solamatográficos. Fallout is a series that, as I mentioned before, draws all its inspiration from the wildly popular video games of the same name, which include a total of 9 editions, 6 of these belonging to the main timeline, from Fallout in 1997, the very first game, all the way to Fallout 76, released in 2018, and 3 spin-offs: Fallout Tactics, Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, and Fallout Shelter. Even though the series doesn't directly adapt any of the stories seen in the video games, it's presented as an original story set within the official canon that aims to expand the franchise's lore. Set in the year 2296, the furthest chronological point in the entire Fallout universe's timeline, the series presents a post-apocalyptic world where humanity's timeline took a somewhat different course, leading to a third world war in the year 2077, which devastated the entire planet. An event known as the Great War. Although the consequences of this conflict were global, most of the story, both in the series and in the video games, takes place on the west coast of the United States, in states like California and the city of Las Vegas, Nevada. Places that now take the form of arid, uncultivable stretches of land because they are post-war radioactive dumping grounds known as wastelands. Even though life is tough in the wastelands, being radioactive desert expanses with a vast scarcity of water and resources in general, several groups and factions of Great War survivors have managed to thrive. Although nuclear radiation has done its damage, creating all kinds of mutated creatures like giant insects and mammals, very peculiar aquatic creatures, and of course it has also affected human beings who, after prolonged exposure to surface radiation, transform into what is known as a ghoul or feral zombie, long-lived and resilient beings similar to zombies. While they usually retain their intelligence, over time their cognitive abilities degrade into feral ghouls, which are more violent and far less sentient. In fact, we can see this exemplified in Cooper Howard, one of the main characters in the story, who, after having lived for almost 200 years in the wasteland, has undergone a complete metamorphosis into a ghoul, yet managed to keep his mind intact thanks to a yellow chemical that prevents his mental deterioration. However, the most dangerous creatures in the wasteland aren't just the result of radioactive mutations. There are also threats that are the direct consequence of genetic engineering experiments which have existed long before the war, such as super mutants and Deathclaws, both of which have already made their appearance in the series. Now, what led humanity to a third world war and the near total annihilation of all life on the planet's surface? The timeline of the Fallout universe is similar to the events that occurred in our own reality. The turning point comes in 1949, the year the Soviet Union became the second nation to successfully develop its first nuclear weapon. The United States was the first nation to achieve a weapon through atomic fission in 1945, known as the atomic bomb. However, with other nations beginning to develop the same type of nuclear arsenal, the United States was losing its standing as the world's leading global power, as other nations would reach their level much sooner than anticipated. Knowing this, and while the major world powers were focused on the atomic revolution, the United States would bet on a new technology developed in 1947 by 3 American physicists, John Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley. I'm talking about the transistor. With the invention of the transistor and the technologies that were later developed from it, what we know as the digital revolution was born. This small piece of electrical engineering is part of every modern electrical system, leading to the development of integrated circuits, binary language, microprocessors, personal computers, smartphones, and even the wildly popular artificial intelligence. In terms of technology, it's one of the most important developments in history. Its impact spans computing, communications, economics, science, and everyday life. In contrast to this, Fallout presents a world where the invention of the transistor never happened, and as a result, the digital revolution never took place, leaving the world stuck with analog and nuclear technology, characteristic of the first half of the 20th century. That's why the Fallout universe seems frozen in a retro-futuristic era built around robotics and nuclear engineering, giving rise to a peculiar aesthetic known as atom punk. The fact that the transistor was never invented would not only lead to a technological stagnation, but would also drive socio-political events and conflicts that never came to pass in our reality. And the thing is, the United States, by not leading a digital revolution that it could leverage as one of the most powerful nations in the world, would also focus its efforts on the atomic race and the technologies derived from it, such as fusion reactors, power armor, advanced robotics, artificial intelligence, and cold fusion. All these inventions that we see throughout the 2 seasons of Fallout. With other global powers hot on the heels of the United States in terms of nuclear potential, the conflicts and tensions during the historical period known as the Cold War would lead the North American nation down a much more radical path. And the thing is, as the Fallout universe proposes, the United States, in an attempt to defend the nation from communist movements, led in this case by China and the Soviet Union, they would launch an administrative restructuring campaign where the 50 semi-autonomous states would now be merged into 13 state federations known as the Commonwealths. All of this with the goal of establishing a more centralized, far more authoritarian government, less tolerant of movements opposing the American way of life in the 50s. Alongside all of this, we would have the already mentioned nuclear arms race, led by the global powers, especially China and the United States. Now let's consider the impact and energy output that a society technologically based on nuclear energy could have. And that is, unlike modern society where our energy consumption comes from electrical power, the world of Fallout bases all of its technology and consequently its energy consumption on nuclear power, which over time becomes unsustainable. The materials used in modern inventions are cheaper and relatively easier to obtain than the raw materials used to create nuclear energy. Materials like uranium, for example, are quite rare and risky to handle due to their radioactivity. Mass exploitation of nuclear energy would lead to a shortage of raw materials much faster than if an electrical power source were used instead. So much so that it's estimated that in a world like Fallout's, ruled by nuclear power, society would consume up to 4 times more energy than we currently do. An absolute outrage. In this way, the aforementioned nuclear technological and arms race would lead to a rapid scarcity of resources like uranium and especially oil, and consequently an energy crisis. And in fact, this is exactly what this universe presents, an energy crisis stemming from the exploitation of nuclear energy. And as a result, China and the United States would seek to absorb and conquer neighboring nations in order to seize their resources and keep fueling their energy machine, something we can see through the timeline of the video games. The expansion of these 2 nations grew so much to such a point that both countries entered into direct conflict in the year 2066 when China invaded the territory of Alaska, which by then already belonged to the United States, all with the goal of seizing the vast oil reserves of the territory, an event we briefly see during the 2nd season of the series. The United States, who were at a clear disadvantage against the Asians, managed to stay in the fight thanks to the introduction of power weapons or power armors in 2067 and the help of Canadian military forces, which involuntarily joined the United States in the fight against the Asian infantry. In the year 2074, the United States, surprisingly, would launch an invasion into the territories of central China and Korea, forcing Chinese military forces to retreat back to their territory and be finally expelled from Alaskan territory after nearly 8 years of war. And they would also take the opportunity to establish military bases in the conquered Asian territories and keep Chinese resistance under control. However, thanks to the series, we know that this is only part of what actually happened. The United States would deploy in Alaska weapons resulting from experimentation and genetic engineering, the Deathclaws, lethal hybrid creatures designed by the US government for combat, and it was their introduction that finally weakened the Asian infantry. Even though the United States and China already had nuclear arsenals, throughout this entire conflict, neither nation used the atomic bomb against the other. However, with American forces stationed on Asian soil, the resentment of the Red Nation toward its enemies grew in secret, and a third world conflict involving nuclear weapons would be imminent. This is why in the year 2054, shortly before the Alaskan War, the United States government, together with Vault-Tec and in partnership with the robotics company Robco, would launch Project Safehouse, which would consist of the construction of 122 underground nuclear shelters throughout the entire American territory, with each shelter having a housing capacity of around 1,000 citizens. This, of course, being a for-profit project, as people would have to pay exorbitant amounts to secure their spot and guarantee their space inside one of the shelters in the event of a catastrophe. An example of how an American capitalist company like Vault-Tec saw an opportunity to amass a fortune by exploiting citizens' fears of a third global conflict. The vaults were sold as safe, self-sufficient, climate-controlled locations with enough resources to sustain entire generations. But the truth is that not all vaults would follow these standards. Many of them were used by the various companies involved in the project, including Robco and Vault-Tec itself, to conduct all kinds of experiments on their residents, ranging from social experiments to genetic manipulation. And so, on October 23, 2077, without warning, the inevitable happens. Nuclear war breaks out, bringing the destruction of human civilization as we know it. Even though the video games reference this event, they never make it clear who actually started the nuclear war. And the show, while it digs deeper into the subject, pointing to Mr. House and Vault-Tec as the ones responsible for firing the first shot, still keeps the identity of the culprit a secret. But all signs point to Vault-Tec and its top executives as the ones who orchestrated the nuclear devastation of the entire planet in order to set their plan within the vaults into motion. The Fallout video games are role-playing adventure games, meaning there's no single ending when you play the story mode. Instead, the ending is shaped by the choices and alliances you make along the way. Something that, believe it or not, the show actually adapts pretty well, as we see how the different characters, especially Lucy McLean, are put in moral dilemmas that push them to make complicated decisions and evolve as characters. I have to say that when I first started the series, it seemed a bit absurd to me, especially the action sequences, but I think it has aged pretty well over time, and now that I know the rich lore of this franchise, it fascinates me so much more. I think it's a series with a lot of potential, and I can't wait to see the secrets that will be revealed in the third season. And well guys, that's it for today's video where I tried to explain the entire Fallout universe. The truth is, it's a universe with a pretty extensive, dense and complex lore, and I think it's very hard to adapt all of this into a series. And I think that was part of the problem when I first started watching the series, because I didn't understand the context of everything that was happening, and fitting all that information into a series I think is really quite difficult, even if it's in series format. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video trying to explain the context, timeline, sci-fi and lore of the series. And well, that it helps you understand it a bit better. if you haven't seen the series, when you do, you'll get it a bit better. And if you've already seen it and plan to rewatch it, now you'll appreciate it a bit more. And of course, if you like videos like this where I break down the sci-fi and lore behind a universe, beyond just the on-screen content, well, of course, swing by my channel where you'll find much more content like this. And subscribe so you don't miss future videos. I'm Didier Solanilla, and remember, being told isn't the same as seeing it yourself.